Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk bugle, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's bugle 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I thought
button?
I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? The Elk Talk Podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, ensuring the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. To become a member, go to rmef.org.
And the podcast is also brought to you by OnX Maps. And with OnX Maps, you can know where you stand with the most accurate hunting GPS tech on the market with land ownership maps that work offline. Go to onxmaps.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 20% when you sign up for an app membership at onxmaps.com.
The podcast is also brought to you by Gerber. Go to gerbergear.com and learn about the knives, the Vital, the Big Game Vital, the Gator Premium, all the things that we use when we're out in the woods, and not just knives, but also some really cool multi-tools that they have.
We're also proud to partner with Sitka Gear. And if you go to sitkagear.com, you'll see their full line of clothing. And their tagline is turning clothing into gear. And they are doing that through advanced technology that allows you to stay in the field longer, hunt harder, and stay safer.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by GoHunt.com. Go to GoHunt.com and sign up for the Insider. The Insider is changing how hunts and hunting information are found. No doubt about that. Use promo code ELKTALK, and when you sign up for the Insider, you're going to get $50 of store credit, mad money, in their gear shop.
And we are also brought to you by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. And Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls is the original designer and inventor of the pallet plate diaphragm that's completely changed the way elk calls are made and used. And to find out more and to order your elk calls, go to RockyMountainHuntingCalls.com or BuglingBull.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 15% on all of your elk calls and elk call accessories.
Well, Corey, we've... I don't know how far along we are in the making sure everybody goes elk hunting this year story.
We're not very far along. There's a long ways to go.
What was it? 2 podcasts ago, we gave the overall strategy of short-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies. And the 2 states that ended up in our, if you have more budget, kind of last on the list were Utah and Nevada.
Yep. And I think they're both a complex state. There are some reasons why you would want to apply there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the 95% of the population, there's really not a reason to apply there. And so we'll combine those 2 in this discussion and talk about that, maybe talk about why you'd want to apply there. And there's certainly good hunting to be had there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But it's probably not for what we're trying to accomplish here.
Right.
It's lower on the priority list.
It's definitely not going to be one of those where you can count on going elk hunting every year.
Right.
Well, wait, Utah does have some...
They do have over-the-counter.
Yeah. So I guess you could do that, but I've never hunted the over-the-counter stuff. Everybody I talk to says it's intensely crowded.
Yeah.
Makes Colorado look like a quiet day in the woods.
And I've talked to others who they've got their little secret spots and they go to and they get into elk and they don't see other people and they have a good hunt. But for the most part, it's
tough.
Very competitive.
Yeah, and I think Utah is known for its limited entry elk hunts is what has gained Utah the reputation of being a place to shoot old elk. And the part of that is they manage their units based on age class.
Yeah.
So that not points, not whatever. They expect that the harvest will have between, I'm trying to remember what they break it out, 7 years and older, or, 5 to 7 years. And so that's what they manage the unit for. And that requires some really tight restrictions.
Control.
On opportunity to reach that kind of age class in areas where you have that much public land.
Yep.
The other part that has so much appeal to Utah is if you were to draw and lightning strikes and your number comes up, you get to hunt with a rifle in late September.
During the peak. Not even late, mid to late. And that's the downside if you're an archery hunter to Utah is their season opens around August 15th.
Yeah.
Now, it's opened as early as August 13th, I think.
Yeah.
And it's closed. The year I drew, it closed on September 13th was the last day of the archery season.
Yeah.
It might have been September 12th, but it was right in there. So, you're really just getting into the bulls starting to talk, starting to hang around with the cows.
Yeah.
And the next day, rifle season opens. And so you're hunting rutting bull elk in Utah with a rifle on September 14th, September 15th through September 27th, somewhere in there, and it's definitely conducive if you are a rifle hunter and you want that rut experience. You can have that in Utah if you're willing to wait.
Yeah, a long time or get extremely lucky.
Yep.
Back to our podcast where we're trying to get people to hunt elk every year. If you're already in the pool here in Utah, obviously you wouldn't jump out once you've already got some years invested. But even for people who have a lot of time invested in it, they could still be in it. Even if you have 10 points today, it might still be long term before you draw.
Totally.
In Utah. You could be well into your 20 points.
Yeah. Yeah, you might say you're 4 points behind what you need to draw a tag that you want to draw. In 10 years, you might still be 4 points behind in Utah.
Yeah. Look at the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources publishes how many people have been buying points at each point level. So you can't just look at the draw stats from last year because there are so many people on the sidelines just buying a point every year. And what they do is they wait until they think, it now looks like I've got enough points, I might have a chance. So they jump in and they're, like you said, 3 or 4 points ahead of you. So they keep pushing that point requirement. And if I was just getting into the Western point game and I didn't have the budget that maybe I would have 10 years later, Utah would be a hard place to justify. I say that having drawn... I've been lucky in Utah. In 2014, I drew archery elk. 2016, I drew a limited entry archery mule deer. 2018, I drew archery bison. And this year, I'm drawing rifle pronghorn because I'm the guy with
the most points.
Yeah. But if I was just starting out, it'd be hard to allocate that money there.
Yeah. And it used to be, and Utah is still not an expensive state to play the game. I think a license is $65, and you have to buy that license. You buy the license for $65, and is it $5, I think, per species or something to apply?
I should look it up.
So it's not overly expensive, but realistically, any decent hunt for a non-resident, the early season archery, you probably aren't even going to get to hunt the true rut with a bow. You're still looking at 14 points now. And in 14 years, it's probably going to be in the 20s. So it's a very long-term, or if you just want to put it in there and have a chance in that draw, if you've got an extra $65 or $70 a year to burn, you could apply for Utah.
Right. Just look at it as a really expensive raffle tag.
Yeah.
Because they have a bonus point system, and that's the interesting part about Utah. They split their draw into two pieces. Last podcast we talked about Arizona kind of has two pieces.
Right.
So in Utah, half of the tags go into the first draw,
which is a preference. Basically, who has the most points gets those tags. Right. So if you're at the top of that tier, if nobody has more than 12 points and you have 12 points in that unit and you apply for it, you're guaranteed that tag.
Right.
And then the other half of the tags
go in a random, well, they call it random, but it really is a bonus point.
It's
draw.
A weighted, yeah.
So if you have, just simplistically saying, and most people know how bonus points work, if I have 1 point and someone has 10, it's the same as if I bought one raffle ticket and they got 10 raffle tickets. They have
10 times higher chance of drawing.
Right. But I could still be that lucky person.
Yep.
I always say that if there were 100 tickets in a bucket and I bought 99 of them, I'd still lose sleep because there's just more than a 1% likelihood, not probability, but just likelihood of luck that someone would get pulled instead of me. But so we got to think about that as you still have a chance.
Yep.
But understand that, it's if you're just beginning, it's like buying a raffle ticket. But think about how many other quote unquote raffle tickets are in the bucket, because everybody above you gets multiple points depending on where it's been. I don't even know what the maximum points is in Utah anymore. I know it's in the 20s.
Yeah, it's got to be, because I started late. I was at least 5 years late. It was more than that. But I drew in 2011 or 12 with 10 points. And so we're 7 years past that. So yeah, it's probably 22, 23.
Something like that. So that's how Utah works. They have, like you said, the early archery seasons that start in August. Then they have the rifle seasons right in the peak of the rut. And then a few of their units, they have mid-seasons now in early October.
Well, they usually have a muzzleloader on the tail end of the rut.
That's right.
So they have a muzzleloader's tag in most units that it's a shorter season and it's after the rifle season, but it's still picking up that last part of September, first part of October.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And then they give the elk a break, and the bulls anyhow, until about November 10th, plus or minus there, they have a late season in most units. And those late seasons appeal to, not to me anymore, because I'm out of points. I'm standing on the sidelines. How long do you got to stand on the sidelines?
5 years. There's a 5-year waiting period. Once you draw, you can't apply or build points for 5 years.
All right. You building points again?
I'm not.
No.
I made it through that waiting period and decided not to re-engage in Utah.
So you're a perfect example then of the person who might be starting out in Utah, because once your 5-year wait expired, you're at 0 points. And you made the analysis that it's just hard to justify.
I could probably draw another tag in 15 to 20 years, and I might get lucky in between there. But I don't want to count on that luck. Utah's got some good hunting, but realistically, I could draw Arizona twice in the time that I can draw Utah and have just as good of a hunt, if not better.
Yeah. Okay. What else we don't, I mean, if people want to apply in Utah and they got the budget, I certainly don't want to discourage them.
Yep.
Because, like I was saying in the one podcast, how I got my elk tag. So, little history. It used to be that non-residents were just like residents. We could only apply for elk or deer or antelope. You couldn't apply for all three.
Yep.
And you could only apply for one of the once-in-a-lifetime species. So when I started this 20 years ago in Utah, I started with, this will tell people what kind of a fool I am, started with antelope. So I'd forsaken elk and deer. And then in my once-in-a-lifetime, I'd went with bison. You would think that I would have So it was, I think, 10 years ago when they started letting non-residents apply for everything.
Yep.
You can do elk and deer and antelope and whatever. So that's why if you look at the point totals in Utah, I think right now the 10 or 11 point total is just massive number of people. And the reason that is they never used to let non-residents apply for everything.
Yep.
So you can.
And you can just imagine if you've got 1,000 people and they have to choose either deer, elk, or antelope, that's going to be split, probably not equally, but it's going to reduce the pressure on each of them.
Yeah.
Now, if you allow them for $5 to apply or buy a point for each one,
Right.
all 1,000 people are going to be in that pool for each species.
Yep. So here I am. If you would have told me that whenever that started, that I would draw elk and deer before I drew antelope, I would have said, I'd have laughed. That's impossible. Well, and not that has anything to do with elk hunting, but I'm one of the 3 people sitting on 20 non-resident pronghorn points in Utah. Last year, there were 3 people who applied. There were 5 of us last year. 2 bought points. Me and 2 others applied for 2 bonus tags. I did not draw, which was good. We should talk about the order of how Utah does it, is that Utah has an order. You're only allowed 1 limited entry tag a year.
Yep.
So they draw limited entry deer to start with. So if you draw that deer tag, they just give you points for anything else you applied for any of the other species. They're not going to let you have a limited entry deer and limited entry elk. So they do the deer draw. Okay, you didn't draw deer. They do the elk draw. Okay, you didn't draw elk. You're still in it then for pronghorn and all the once in a lifetime. And they just keep working their way down the list like that. So
you do need to be strategic if you're applying for multiple species.
Right.
Because if you really want that elk tag, you probably need to buy a point for deer.
Right.
If there's a chance that you might draw deer, or even if there's not a chance, that you still have a chance.
Right.
And you might be sitting on a lot of elk points, guaranteed to draw. But if you happen to get lucky and draw that deer tag, elk gets thrown out and you have to wait until next year.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is I drew deer with 6 points. There was 1 non-resident tag for a really high demand deer tag, archery. And I could not believe I drew it. I had been on a bear hunt in Alaska, and we got back to civilization. I called my wife, and hi, how you doing? And she said, oh, by the way, there's this, I can't remember what, $300 charge on our credit card for Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. I'm like, what? That's more than the pronghorn price. I grabbed my computer, I looked it up. That's the price of a deer tag. That can't be. There's no way I drew that deer tag. Well, I did.
Yep.
So,
and that means you don't get to draw the antelope tag.
Correct. So that year, maybe I would have drawn that. Maybe I would have been lucky in the antelope draw, but I was kicked out of the antelope draw. They just gave me a point. Said, you've already drawn a limited entry deer tag. You are not allowed to get a point or to get a tag for pronghorn. So the order in which Utah does it is something you have to pay attention to if you apply down there. I don't know what I'm going to do when I burn these antelope points, because then I'm going to be on the waiting list for elk, on the waiting list for deer, no pronghorn points. My bison, I got that. So am I going to walk away from 10 moose, goat, and sheep points? Yeah, I probably will. I don't know.
Yeah.
I say that, and then I don't know. Hard to say.
It is, and I look back, I started applying for sheep in Wyoming when they first started.
Yeah.
And I think I built up 6 points for sheep, and that was back in the late 90s when they started, I think.
Yep. Yeah, 2007, then they cranked up the price.
Yeah.
And I bailed.
And I didn't even make it that far. I only made it till about 2004, 2005, and bailed. Okay. And looking back now, had I stuck with it, I would have drawn a sheep tag in Wyoming by now.
I know, I kicked myself. In 2007, I think it was, I bailed. Me and my son each had 7 points. And so I did not realize so many other people were going to bail.
Yeah.
because the point price went from, I can't remember, what it was $50 to $100 or some crazy number. And I think they're going to raise it again, I heard.
Yeah.
Or they have. I don't pay attention to Wyoming moose, goat, and sheep. Well, it would only be moose and sheep because they don't have a point system for their goats. But are there any species in Utah that are exempt from the point system? I don't. Thankfully, we don't have to talk about general deer because this is an elk podcast.
That's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, you go to Go Hunt and read about how their general deer system works.
Yeah, if you're really interested.
Yeah, but Go Hunt has this strategy article here. It's got the populations of elk by unit. It's got, here it is. It has the age class objectives. So there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units that they have an age class objective of over 7.5 years old.
All but one of those units are above objective.
Yeah. That's a very high age objective for... I would bet you in most states with a lot of general hunting pressure, the average age is 3. 3 to 4.
Yep.
And then they've got the largest number of units is managed for the 6.5 to 7-year-old objective.
Which is still putting you in a lot of mature elk.
Yeah. Yeah. A 6.5-year-old bull elk is a big old boy.
Yep. He's probably not going to get bigger.
Right.
He's at his prime.
Yeah. And then they've got some that they manage for 5.5 to 6 and some for 4.5 to 5. And there's very few units that are not meeting those objectives. So that's one of the good things. I'm trying to figure out what, and my son Matthew was home for Christmas and we were looking over all this information with his 16 points. And what we concluded is to have any predictability that he might get to go, we got to look at the late rifle hunts. Yeah. And then there's only a few of them that he would be guaranteed to tag at 16 points. Yeah. The archery stuff, the early rifle, the muzzleloader, he's 5, 6 points out of the game in most instances. And I say that just to give people the understanding that if you're just starting this, think about that. Someone with 16 points is
still
relegated.
Doesn't have a chance.
Yeah.
It's like Oregon. If you're hoping to draw one of the better quality hunts in Oregon, you really have no chance statistically starting right now.
Yeah.
And there's always the bonus round that somebody can slip in, but it's just, and they offer so few tags for a non-resident in those good units that you're really
hard.
Yeah, you're better off buying a raffle tag from each of the states and hoping to draw their governor tag or something.
Yeah. Well, Arizona has the super big game raffle. Just go stuff that box full of all the raffle tags you want to buy. I do that.
Do you?
Yeah. In my mind, that's part of, when I dropped out of Wyoming moose and sheep, that I take that money every year in the Arizona super big game raffle. It's online. I buy raffle tickets for those. It's kind of still part of my budget, out of sight, out of mind. But some year, I'm just convinced I'm going to draw that statewide governor type tag, and I'm going to spend however long it takes in Arizona finding Big Hank. But well,
somebody's got to draw it.
That's true. Somebody does. It's I'm not somebody though. So.
What's the price of a tag in Utah for elk?
Oh gosh,
that's is it 1,000?
I think it is. Where is it? Somewhere here it's listed. You think I would have had that handy? Where's your cheat sheet? You didn't have it on your cheat sheet?
I didn't have the price of the tag written down.
All right.
It's a more expensive tag though when you draw it.
It is. I think I have it right here. I have the regs somewhere here. I downloaded them. Where is it? That's my first experience with a Mac.
I was going to say, you're navigating your little...
Am I doing okay?
Yeah.
Where did it go? Well, I'm lying. It's pretty expensive. Let's just put it that way.
We can find out, but I want to say it's $1,000 or $865 something.
It's a big chunk of change, and For people who are on the tighter budget thing that we talked about the other day. All right, here. Oh, I know where it is.
Yeah, organized.
I know where it is. It's in here. I'm gonna not let you see my. See that? Utah. 2019 regs, huh?
A whole folder dedicated to Utah.
Yeah, I've got every state by folder. All right. Here we go. Non-resident license fees. The non-resident hunting license is $65. These are the permit fees if you draw. If you put into one of the multi-season limited entry where you get to hunt
all three
seasons, archery, muzzleloader, and rifle, it's $1,505 for a non-resident. Limited entry, which is most of what we'll be looking at, is $800.
So with the license, it was $865.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is a little bit of a tangent. So those of you folks listening to this in Montana, what do you and maybe Idaho? What do you pay for your elk tag here in Idaho?
As a resident?
Yeah.
I don't even know. I get a sportsman's pack. I get all the tags licensed, but I think it's 32, 38, something like that.
Yeah. Montana, I buy the whole sportsman's package too, and I can't remember if you bought the elk tag separately. I think it's $20 in Montana. A Utah resident pays $285 for their elk tag.
Yep.
They would burn down the Capitol in Montana. So the ratio, the price difference between resident and non-resident is not even 3-to-1.
Yeah.
That says a lot to how much Utah residents are shouldering the load.
Yep. And that's for the limited entry. Their general season over-the-counter tags are $50 for a resident.
Yeah, and $393 for a non-resident.
So probably more in line with most states. Probably a less expensive option for a non-resident than most states at $393. But again, you're with the army of other hunters and not necessarily in quality units.
Yeah. So I knew I had this here somewhere.
Well, I didn't doubt it for a minute.
You didn't? Okay. So since we're not heavily encouraging new applicants to hunt Utah, is there anything that we got to cover or think about that?
Not in Utah, I don't think. And again, Utah is an option. We don't want to completely discourage it, but for what we're talking about here of coming up with a strategy for applications, Utah is low. Well, it's not even on my list anymore, if that tells you anything. It would be low to recommend that, hey, if you're going to take and set aside some money to apply for hunts and hopefully draw an elk tag, whether it's short-term, mid-term, or even long-term, Utah is just not a good option there.
It's an inexpensive place to buy raffle tags.
Yep.
So, but when I went, I had a great hunt.
Yeah. I definitely manage it well.
Yeah. I went the last part of the season. I didn't plan on having the tag. I think I said on the one podcast, they called me. I got a leftover tag someone returned. I was next in line. They called me. They said, you have 2 days or something like that. So I called and said, yeah, I'll take it. And then I blocked out the last 7 days of the season to hunt. And I hunted for, I think, 3 days. And I had one close encounter. Might have been the 4th day. And then that night back at camp, my wife called me and she had a health emergency. She had to go have an emergency surgery. So that season got cut short, which I don't know if I would have filled the tag, but you never know. But it was definitely, I was way more, my mind wasn't in elk hunting at that point. Yeah. So, but, I guess if you're buying raffle tags, look at Utah as just a higher dollar raffle tag.
Yep.
And maybe you'll draw.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Someday.
The good part is if you draw, lots of public land and lots of high age class units to apply in.
And Utah, there for a while, they were, their age class, some of those units were 9.5, 10.5-year-old bulls that they were
crazy
pulling out of there. And they've added more tags over the last 6 to 8 years.
Yeah.
And so the quality, you don't see as many of those 400-inch bulls. There for a while, Utah was the place to go if you wanted to hunt a 400-inch bull.
Yeah, for sure.
And they've kind of brought that management and the age objective back down. So it's, it's still definitely quality and mature elk, but there aren't as many of those true monster elk being shot every year.
Right.
Still lots of nice elk and still monster elk being shot. But
yeah, you let me shoot a 7.5-year-old bull, I'm going to be...
I'm not going to complain I didn't get a 10.5-year-old bull.
Yeah, I am going to be dancing in the streets.
Yep.
So, what was the Utah deadline? March 2nd, something like that?
I've got that one written down. Yeah, Utah is March 7th this year.
March 7th?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So there you have it, folks. You have until March 7th to buy some raffle tickets from the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources.
Yep.
They don't have a state lottery, but this could be your version of the state lottery.
Yep. And if you're interested in just buying bonus points, you have to have a license.
Yep.
So $65. And I think the deadline for the bonus points is later by a week or something. It's March 12th or 14th, somewhere. And again, don't take these dates as gospel deadlines. Definitely check the websites for each of the departments we're talking about. But
yeah, I always rely on that. Go to the state website.
Yep.
I always tell people, go to that state website. Don't.
Yep. Because it might have been March 7th last year, and this year it's March 6th, and I don't want you to miss it by a day if you're going to apply. So
yeah. Well, the other part about Utah is it's hard to gain unless you're an outfitter, you're not going to gain a lot of elk hunting experience to know this unit and that unit. You're just, it's the way it is. So I don't have any great big stories to tell about Utah.
I drew a tag, and I waited 10 years, and it's the same story as most states. I started putting in when it took 3 points to draw a tag, and by the time I got to 3 points, it took 6 points to draw the same tag. When I got to 6, it took 9, and so I ended up jumping to a different unit that I drew with 10 points. And before the draw, even before the application period even started, I had a couple of residents down there call me and say, hey, we are experiencing the worst drought I've seen in 30 years here. You might consider waiting to draw the tag. And it was an early, one of the years when the season opened early and closed early. And so a lot of things against what we would hope to have for a hunt.
Right.
And I thought, you know what, even if it's early, even if there's a drought, I can still find elk and have a hunt. And it's Utah. There's going to be big bulls. We'll make it work. And we got stuck in a rut. There were, I know, 3 people that had hunted the same unit consecutively for the previous 3 years. So I had really good intel. All of them were saying the same thing. The elk come right here. They rut right here beyond this ridge. And we went there and, 3 or 4 days into it, I'm calling people saying, hey, we're not seeing any elk at all. We aren't seeing any sign. And all of them were reassuring me, don't worry, they're going to show up tomorrow. It's just overnight, the elk come to this area to rut. And we stayed in that area for 8 days and only had a day and a half left in the season before we actually pulled up and went to a different part of the unit. And we had only called in, I believe, 2 bulls in 8 days.
Ooh.
And I passed up a bull on the first night that was probably a 320-inch bull and regretted it the rest of the season trying to find that same bull for those 8 days and just couldn't do it. And ended up relocating and got out of the truck, and there were elk just screaming everywhere. So realized the drought had shifted where the elk were.
Oh, okay.
And we just got stuck in that rut, and fortunately it worked out, and I shot a really nice bull on the last day, and it worked out. But it was a tough hunt because of the rut. We had a full moon. It was early. A lot of things stacked against us. And with 10 points in that investment, you've got $600 in license and application fees up to that point, plus another $800 in the tag.
Right.
So it's, we're $1,500 into this hunt, 10 years investment, and to go and have a disappointing quality experience because of all of those factors, it didn't leave the best of a experience.
Well, for me, that just is the reminder that it goes back to something we've talked about on prior podcasts, that because you have that tag doesn't mean you're guaranteed perfect conditions, perfect everything.
No.
Every year we hear about the person who's waited 10, 15, 20 years and they go on the hunt and it wasn't what they expected.
Yep.
which gets back to our continual statement of go hunt elk every year.
Yeah.
Don't put all your eggs in that one basket.
And with us talking about these applications and everything, this is one bucket that you have a chance to go elk hunting in. There's a whole other plethora of over-the-counter opportunities that if you don't even want to mess with draw systems, there's still 3 or 4 states you can just go and buy a tag and go hunt. So
that's a good reminder, Corey, that I think in the West, as states have evolved with these, I call them schemes, point schemes, don't lose sight of the fact that if you really want to go hunt elk, you can hunt elk in multiple states every year just by taking advantage of the over-the-counter options.
Yep. And there's some good options there.
Yeah.
But for these discussions, we're focused on the schemes.
Because we get a lot. I would say one of the top emails we get is, I'm new to this. I want to go elk hunting. I'd like to go to a place that, and usually they say, here's the kind of hunt I'm looking for. I want a lot of public land. I want older bull elk, and I don't want a lot of hunting pressure.
Yeah. Well, and I want to hunt during the rut.
Right.
With a rifle.
So
from the road.
Yeah. So when you say you want older elk, low hunting pressure, and lots of public land, public land is not the qualifier, but older bull elk with less hunting pressure, you're looking at all the limited entry units at that point. You're not looking at over-the-counter units.
And there may be some. I know there's people listening right now that are saying, I've got a place that's over the counter that there's no other people and there's 10-year-old bulls there. Yeah.
Right.
Those places exist.
Yeah.
But
and if you have one of those places, don't bring your brother-in-law there. Don't bring your work buddy there. Keep it to yourself, because those kind of places don't stay that way if you start bringing people there.
Yep.
That's like a major... One of the podcasts recently, we talked about public land etiquette. Wonder if we should talk about hunting partner etiquette.
We could do a whole episode on that. And I'm fortunate with my hunting partners and the people I hunt with. You know, they get vetted pretty heavily as far as, hey, this is a sacred piece of information I'm giving you. We're going hunting here. Please don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And I've had areas ruined, completely ruined areas because one person finds out or one person goes, and pretty soon they tell 15 people and everybody tells their buddies, and it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to completely hunt out and ruin an over-the-counter area.
Yeah. Huh. Well, the etiquette is if someone takes you to their spot, don't go there without them.
Yep.
That's just go. Maybe you look around and say, well, okay, I see there's a burn or a clear cut or whatever. Okay, he's hunting these elevations. Go find your own spot that kind of looks like that. And a lot of hunting friendships are lost over lack of discretion in how people do that. I just wouldn't feel right doing it. That's why I tell anyone who I know who's even remotely close to, hey, if this is some spot that you kind of hold as your own, don't tell me about it.
Not that you're going to go out and tell anybody else, but you don't want that burden of responsibility of...
Yeah. I tell them, I don't want to know your spots. Yeah. I have my places, and I'm like this almost schizophrenic hunter where every year I almost go to a different spot for the idea of trying it. And the downside of that is occasionally we stumble into the spots that other people hunt, and they're like, what are you doing here? You're going to ruin everything. Well, they're not, we go somewhere, and I feel bad when people think that we purposefully went somewhere that is quote unquote their spot. It's, where you and I hunted in Montana, so many people in Bozeman know about that spot. And
well, it wasn't much of a secret. I mean, you showed very prominent landmarks in the video, and as we're filming it, I'm asking the question, are you sure you want that lake in the background? You're like, if people know where this is, they still aren't going to come here.
Right.
And if they saw us hunt there, they would recognize why, because we struggled to find any elk. There were grizzly bears everywhere. But
so I went back there this year for 2 days because a couple guys, you've ruined it. So I went back there for a busy weekend in September. I never saw another hunter.
Yeah.
And then I went for.
Did you hear any elk or see any elk?
No, I didn't. I didn't even get a grouse. That was such a bad. I'm a bad hunter. So I went back for 5 days in rifle season. I saw two other hunters. They were on day 3. I saw two other hunters. So for supposedly having ruined the spot, it doesn't get a lot of hunting pressure because of low elk numbers and high grizzly bear numbers. But so in what we do, it's a little different context, I guess, than if your coworker says, hey, if you want to join me and my buddy this weekend, I know you've been struggling. We got a spot. We'll help you out. Well, understand that that guy and his buddy have probably spent a decade learning that every little intricacy of that spot. What happens in the morning? What happens if it rains? What happens if it's hot?
Where do the elk go if they get pressured?
And they're kind enough to give you the crash course that helps you skip that decade-long learning curve. Whatever you do, do not disrespect what they've offered you. I don't know if it's out of ignorance that people don't realize that.
I think most of the time it is just they haven't invested that time into an area to find it, and so it is out of just not understanding how sacred that information really is.
Yeah.
But I think there's other times where it's greed.
Really?
People just get overrun with, I'll do anything it takes to kill an elk, including going into my buddy's spot, hoping he doesn't know about it. And they always know.
Yeah, they find out.
Yeah.
Huh. Well,
that was a bit of a rabbit hole that we went down from Utah application strategy to...
Can't remember how we got on that topic.
We don't remember how we got on any topics other than where we start. But
so the next state after Utah is Montana, but we're going to skip Montana and New Mexico and Colorado and do those as their own podcast.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So
but we can add Nevada to this discussion because it's similar to Utah.
Yeah.
A lot of similar characteristics as far as managed for quality and for age class. Very limited opportunities for non-residents. Very expensive.
Yep.
And kind of falls into that same. If you want to, what's a license there? Is it
$155 for a non-resident license? So you have to buy that to apply. You can ask for a refund of that, but you won't get a point.
Yep.
So if you want to build points there, you're out the $155.
Yeah.
And if you go to Go Hunt, use promo code Elk Talk and get the $50 star credit. Got to get that plug in there. But if you go to Go Hunt and they have the best draw odds of anybody, they're the most accurate. If you look at it, a few years ago, because Nevada's system is so complicated to predict odds, or at least to show the true odds, everyone used to just say, well, there were this many applicants. They didn't say by point total, whether it was their first or fifth or fourth or whatever choice. Go Hunt actually drilled down and got it done. And when they first came out with their draw odds, all of the people who'd been buying raffle tickets in Nevada said, man, I've been buying a bill of goods. My odds aren't even 10% of what I thought they were.
Yep.
So that gets a little bit into the explanation of how Nevada's system works. It's like a lot of states. You got to buy the non-resident license. There's $155 out of your hunting budget every year.
Yep.
Then you have to apply by, what is it this year? April
15th?
Is that what it is?
Nevada, April 15th.
Okay. Us CPAs remember April 15th. We're pretty busy about that time here. So April 15th, you have to apply. And then they don't split their draw in any way like Arizona or Utah does, but they square your bonus points.
Yep. So it's a true bonus draw. The more points you have, the more chances you get. But then if you have 10 points, you don't just get 10 chances. They square it. So you get 10 times 10, which is 100 chances in the draw.
Right.
And so someone coming in with 2 points is getting 4 chances. So if you have 2 points, somebody else has 10 points, they have 5 times more points than you.
Yeah.
But they get a 25 times better chance of drawing that tag than you.
Right. And then they look at, you get, for every species, you get to do 5 hunt codes. So they look at all 5 of yours before they go on to the next one. So here, this is how Nevada explained to me how it works. So everybody gets assigned all their random numbers. So in your example, all right, someone has 10 points. You square that, that's 100, plus they get 1 for the current year. So they got 101 random numbers assigned to them. And the other person, you said, has 2, so you square that, you get 4 plus 1 for the current year, they get 5 random numbers. So they go through every applicant and they assign all those random numbers. And then they take your lowest random number of your 101, in the case of the person with 10 points, or you're the lowest of your 5, in the case of the person with 5. And that's the number you go into the draw with for elk or for whatever the species is that they conduct that whole system.
And then they just start with the lowest random number in the whole list and look at your first choice.
Yep.
If you're the lowest number, you draw your first choice.
Exactly.
And if you, as they go down, they look at your first choice. If there's no tags available, they look at your second choice.
Right.
If there's no tags available, they look at your third choice. And they do that all the way down through the 5th choice.
Right.
So you could draw a really good tag as a 5th choice with 1 point.
Yep.
I mean,
it happens every year.
Statistically, it can happen.
You look at the stats, and every year there's somebody who draws the greatest elk tag in the state with some minuscule number of points.
Yep.
And now that Go Hunt will show it what hunt choice they drew it on. It's crazy how many people are drawing really good elk tags in Nevada with 3rd, 4th, and 5th choices.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't apply in a state like Nevada, where the state you're familiar with, they only look at first choices, and then they go on to people. It's a different mindset where people are like, well, why do I even bother with choices 4 through 5?
Yeah.
Well, here's why.
Yeah, it's almost like you're getting to enter 5 separate draws.
Yeah.
With a random number.
Yeah, I've drawn Nevada archery mule deer 3 times on my 5th choice. And it's kind of my safety net.
Yeah.
With elk, there are no safety nets. It's you just, and kind of like Utah, they open their archery seasons really early. They open them August 16th or something like that, and they run them. Depends on the unit. They stagger how long they keep them open.
Some of them close like August 30th before you even get into September.
Yeah. That's strictly a spot and stock operation.
Or water.
Sit in
water.
Yeah, if you have the fortitude to do that, which I don't. But Nevada, again, their age class is tremendous.
Well, I know in the strategy article on Go Hunt, they have all sorts of graphs and statistics, but one of them is units that have a certain percentage of bulls with 50-inch main beams and 6 points.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, really detailed statistics.
Yep.
And it'll show you which unit has the most bulls with 50-inch main beams and 6 points based on harvest.
Yeah, look at that unit right there. I think that's where you want to apply if you want a bull that almost 60% of the bulls harvested have 50-plus inch main beams.
And are 6 point or better.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
That's, so the blue line here is the 6 points or better.
Several units at 80% or higher.
Yeah, what is this one? That one is at 85% or 6 point or better.
Yeah. So again, when we're talking, 85% of the bulls are 6 point or better, we aren't talking about 300 elk that are being shot or 6 point or better. We're talking about 6 elk, or it's a very low number, which is the downside of Nevada. There's just a very limited number of tags, especially for a non-resident. Yeah. You couple that with squared points and a lot of people sitting at 17 or 18 points, getting 260 chances in the draw when you're starting right now with your 1 chance, odds are against you.
Yeah. So it's it's an opportunity. It's kind of like buying even a more expensive raffle ticket with even lower chances because they square the bonus points.
Yep.
That's why I always put Nevada below Utah if you're just jumping into the game, just because the squaring of points puts new people at such a
disadvantage.
Huge disadvantage. Yeah. But if you're, Nevada has some amazing deer hunting, amazing antelope hunting. If you're into that stuff and you're already applying for those species, by all means.
It's another $10 per species to get a point. And
whatever it is.
And that's, unlike Utah, where I'm not playing the game anymore, I am playing the game in Nevada.
Really?
And it goes back to my goal of being able to hunt an elk in every western state. And that's, once I draw Nevada, and I'm probably not going to hold out for one of the glory tags.
Yeah.
I just want to hunt elk in Nevada and have a good chance of harvesting an elk in Nevada. And once that's done, it's an investment. You're $155 a year in the license. You've got $10 per species application fees. And when you draw the elk tag, it's $1,200.
$1,200, yeah.
So it's not a cheap option to apply or to draw.
Yeah, I think they raised their elk application fee too from $10 to $20.
Might be
something like that. But yeah, it's if you're on as we laid out in that one podcast of all right, what's the budget to realistically be able to play this game of multiple states? Your budget's going to have to get a lot bigger to include Nevada.
Yep. It's
going to take a big chunk of your money every year for a very, very small chance.
And for a long time.
Yeah. I guess how fitting is it that the state with legalized gambling it is the biggest roll of the dice of any state out there for the non-resident elk hunter.
Yeah. And the good news is there's still a lot of public land if you do draw.
So much public land. It's 80, the state of Nevada is 84%, something like that, public land. And where these elk live, with the exception of one unit that I'm aware of, it's about impossible to find an elk on private land. Or it's impossible to find private land that would inhibit your hunt, let's put it that way. You almost would have to try really hard to find a spot where they would be.
Yep. And that's, Nevada is managing for that quality way over opportunity. They're way over objective in almost every unit for elk.
Yep.
The herds of elk are incredible down there to the point where they're exploding in the northern part of Nevada and spilling over into Idaho to the point where Idaho's having to add hunts because there's so many elk in Idaho that are coming from Nevada. And I mean, it's a good problem to have. If you draw that tag, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And we've been down there shed hunting several times, which I know they this year have an enforced season for shed hunting.
Yeah.
But there is a high population of deer and elk in Nevada.
Yeah.
Which makes it appealing.
Yeah. I went to college there, so I graduated from Nevada Reno. Now it's called the University of Nevada. Back in 1988, we called it Nevada Reno. I still call it Nevada Reno, but there were so few elk in Nevada at that time.
Yep.
I think at that time there were 1,500 elk in all of Nevada. And now there's over 15,000 elk in Nevada. And Nevada is kind of these isolated mountain ranges where in a lot of the state, these low, flat desert valleys, you're not going to find elk there. You're going to find elk in these high ridges, high range mountain areas. And so you end up with areas with no elk, and then where there is habitat, there's really good numbers of elk. But you get more up towards the northeast corner, and it is a little bit more can all be elk habitat there. But you get to the central part of the state, or even further south, you're looking at some pretty isolated areas for elk. But I drew with 7 points, but that was what did I have then? I think I might have had 10 points. I drew in 2000. No, I drew 7 points in 2005. But now... Yeah.
We're 13 years, 14 years later.
Yeah.
And
It's crazy what it would take to draw now, but
Yeah.
I still apply because I'm at almost, maybe I'm at 20 desert bighorn points.
Wow.
I'm back up quite a few antelope points. I never get more than 2 or 3 deer points.
Yep.
I end up going on a 5th choice archery mule deer hunt every 3rd or 4th year, so I'll never have many deer points. And now that I'm back off the wait list, I think I'm back up to all the 3 elk points. If I was just an elk hunter and not applying for those other species, I don't think I could justify the cost of the $155 license, the application fee, and everything else just to do Nevada.
Yeah. And what's the wait in Nevada if you draw?
What's the what?
How long do you have to wait before you can apply again in Nevada?
Well, it was 10 years when I got put on the wait list. Now they've cranked it back, I think, to 7 or 5. I can't remember.
So similar to Utah, then you have a long wait. And what that does is it just clears people out and keeps them out of the game for an extended period. Once they draw, they've got their reward, they got their tag. Now they can't play the game for a while to increase the chances for those who haven't drawn.
Yeah. So, Nevada is a fun place. I love the desolation. I love it's a unique habitat area to go. But if it's not part of your budget, don't.
It's at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, don't forego elk hunting this year because you decided to jump into the Nevada game.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're doing all the other things and that you're going on some elk hunts and general or over-the-counter units before you start spending your money. And the Nevada ought to have their website just painted like an elk slot machine or something. Like insert money here.
You get to insert all of your chances individually and then pull the handle to see if you draw.
Yeah. I always have thought, wouldn't it be cool if when a state sorted all the random numbers, they emailed you and said, here's the random number you've been assigned for the draw.
Yep.
That would get people excited. Oh man, I'm random number 64.
Yeah, and do a live drawing of it so it's all videoed on a computer screen.
Kentucky does.
Do they really?
They do a live draw of their elk draw.
I bet you can watch that.
You'll hear these folks down there. Yeah, did you watch that? Or I guess they'll tell stories about, so-and-so was out fishing and I texted them, hey, I'm watching the draw and your name came up. It's like, So,
interesting.
I don't know. Maybe that's another way for states to make money.
Yeah. Maybe
For $10 extra, do you want to know what random number you were assigned?
Exactly.
Would you pay,
and then pay-per-view to watch the draw?
Would you pay $10 extra to know what your random number was that you got assigned?
I wouldn't, because it doesn't change the outcome for me. I'm okay waiting. But
I bet you there's a lot of people who would.
yeah.
So assign all the random numbers 2 weeks in advance of the draw.
Yep.
And just let people
Publish them in a members-only area on your website where you have to pay to get it.
It sounds like you know about that members-only website thing.
There's
I'm just trying to help these state agencies raise more money without having to raise fees across the board. Just whatever you can. It's voluntary. No one would have to pay the $10 to know.
Or you could just create a pool of tags that cost more money to apply for.
That's what Wyoming did.
I know. That's where I was going with that.
They put 40% of them in a high dollar side. I hope no other states go that route.
That's just a money grab there is all that is.
Yeah. So what else we got on we've told the world to not get too excited about Utah and Nevada. All the rest of the states, though, I think we're going to do a pretty heavy sales pitch.
Yeah, we've got Montana coming up, New Mexico, and Colorado, which I think are all deserving of a pretty good look.
Yeah, I've hunted elk in all 3 of those states, and man, if you forced me to choose between one of those 3 states, I don't know which one I would come up with.
That's kind of I've hunted all of them as well.
Yeah.
Colorado for draw would probably be pretty low on my list.
Yeah,
but Montana doesn't have a real great draw system for non-residents either, so it'd probably be New Mexico because it's no bonus points. Everybody has the same chance of drawing the great tags, and
How much does the season date affect what you apply for?
Definitely affects it.
A lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, I ask that because in Nevada, knowing what I have for low points and knowing that bad season dates mean better draw odds, I'm applying for the terrible season dates. And I'm wondering, all right, if by some miracle I do get my name pulled, am I going to have buyer's remorse when they take my $1,200 and
for you to go and chase elk around in the summer?
In August, in the heat of Nevada. I don't know. I often wonder how much that plays into account. One of the things I often get as a comment is that a lot of the deer hunts, whitetail deer hunts in the Midwest, are the guys are really focused from November 1st to about the 10th or 12th. Yeah. So there's a big group of hunters who just block out. I am not applying for any elk hunts that are a week before that or a week after that. Yeah. So that, and this is again me analyzing states and over-analyzing what things affect draw odds. I've found that there's fewer applicants in states that have their core hunting periods during those times when non-residents are whitetail hunting, which is why I hunt in Colorado, and we'll get into this in the Colorado application episode. I hunt the third rifle season because it's the first week in November. Yep. And all those Midwest whitetail hunters are back home whitetail hunting.
See, there's a lot more than just understanding the state's draw process. There's a whole bottle of things to unearth to analyze when and how and strategy.
I wonder how much of it is reality and how much of it is I just made something up and I'm creating my own. I'm believing some borderline conspiracy theory about how it is. That's see right there, and really there's no correlation. All these things I get myself wrapped up about, there's probably nothing that connects anything with the other. But in my mind, I'm convinced, that's how it goes. So,
hey, it's working.
Yeah. I don't know if it's working.
You're drawing tags.
I'm drawing tags. I didn't kill an elk last year.
Well, getting the tags is the hardest part.
That's true. Yeah. So, what do we got?
Well, let's wrap it up. And I've got a Sitka question of the day, week, episode. Yeah. So this one, it might tie in really well with what we've talked about. If you do draw a tag in Utah or Nevada, you've probably never hunted there before.
Correct.
And so now you've got the tag, you've got to do some serious scouting. Yeah. And some of these units are pretty big units. And where do you start? Yeah. And so the question comes to us from Ryan. And Ryan says, say you've drawn a tag in an area you've never been to. Yep. You're trying to find information on that area and contacting the local game warden biologist. Yep. What are some of the questions you're asking them to get the most information possible?
Well, I can tell you what not to do. Don't call and say, I drew this tag. I've never been there. Can you tell me where to go?
Yep.
Because that person is going to send you to the same spot he or she sent the last 45 people who called unprepared and asked the question in the same manner. I think these agency people, and I try to put myself in their shoes.
Oh, yeah.
After the draw results come out, that next morning they come in their phone, they've got 200 messages. Yep. And they've got to get their other work done in addition to that. And so the people who say, can you tell me where to go? I think they have one spot on their map. Anyone who's uninformed, I'm sending them right there.
Yep. Well, Arizona, I don't know if they still do, but they used to, if you drew Unit 1, they would say, Unit 1, elk are concentrated on the east side of Greens Peak on, and they would literally specify where to find elk during the rut on their website. So now you have 150 people that have drawn the tag. Everybody knows those same areas.
Yep.
And I called the first time we drew Unit 1 and talked to the biologist and said, we drew a tag, we're coming from Idaho, we've never been there before. What suggestions do you have? He basically read me what was on the website. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of elk on the east side of Green Peak. You're going to find people here. You're going to find campsites here. And I went to the website, and he's basically regurgitating what's there.
Yeah.
The next time when I drew Arizona, I did what you're talking and had specific places already pre-scouted and called and said, hey, I've scouted, I've been to the unit before, I've been up this trailhead. I'm just wondering throughout the season, is there much hiking traffic on this trailhead? Is there a lot of hunting pressure on this specific trailhead? And got a lot more information because I'd done my homework. I had specific questions about specific areas to ask, and they're more than happy to share their experiences with that. If you're calling, and it's the same for you and I get multiple emails a week. Hey, I just want to go hunting in Colorado. What unit do you suggest I go to? Or I'm thinking about going to this unit. What area within this unit would you suggest I start hunting in? We're not going to tell you.
Right.
Because we're going to tell everybody the same thing, and it's going to ruin it for you.
Right. Yeah, and for me, part of it is this on your own, figure it out, sort of do your own homework thing. So if it's a real generic question, I almost feel like probably this biologist or game manager of, come on, do some of your own homework. And to answer this person's question, I would do as much of my own homework as I possibly can. I'd be as informed as I possibly can be. And I would be very respectful of that person's time and be very brief with them. Kind of like you said, okay, what about this trailhead? What's the hunting pressure? Is there ATV traffic? What happens with the weather if that's a factor in your hunt? Think about the things that are going to be the most critical to the outcome of your hunt and try to ask them maybe 3 or 4 things related to that. Don't think that it's their job to be your scouting service. It's not. The odds are they're probably a hunter if they work for one of these wildlife agencies. So they're going to do what they can to help you. But they also have work to do, and just put yourself in their shoes. If that day, this is call number 20 of the same question, where should I go? What should I do? It's not their job.
Totally.
So
and I think the more detailed you can ask, and if you're asking things like, did you guys do aerial flights this past winter? How were the overall populations? Was the overall population above objective, below objective? They're going to get excited about things like that because that's their job. They're invested in those pieces of information. They're not invested in scouting for you. So to say, a generic, where should I go? You've lost them already. They know that this phone call is a waste of their time.
And they will have their own set of 1 or 2 first questions to determine if you've done your homework. So they're going to smoke you out right away as to whether or not you've done your homework. They're going to say, well, have you been out to our website? Because every year these states get a little better and a little better at putting information on their website about harvest statistics, bull-to-cow ratios, cow-to-calf ratios. Colorado has an interactive map of what's winter range and what's summer range, what's migration corridors. So if I was a Colorado biologist, I'd say, well, have you looked at the map of that unit? And if you said no, I would say, call me back once you've looked at that. Have you read our hunting? Colorado has regional booklets online about the population objectives and trends and everything of every unit in the state. I would ask, well, have you read that? And if they said no, I'd say, well, go read that and call me back.
If you still have questions, call me back.
So I don't mean that in a bad way, because everyone wants to have the best outcome and be prepared with the best information, but it's not the job of these folks to become your scouting service. I know people probably don't want to hear that.
No, it's the truth. You're going to get more information, more helpful information out of someone if you do your homework ahead of time and call with specifics. And if you're able to go to the unit and you call a biologist and say, I was in the unit last weekend and I hiked these trails. I didn't see any sign up here. I dropped down here and saw a sign. Do you know if last year, if there was a lot of snow at this time of year that would have pushed them down lower, would they be back to this historic area? Stuff like that, they're going to eat up. They're going to get excited because they're talking to someone who has done their homework, who's got information that is familiar to them, and they're going to share more with what they know.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, because once applications go out, can I have another option on the question of the week?
Another answer?
No, another question.
Another question?
That and it got me thinking, when draw results come out, if you go out to the hunting forums, I don't know how it is out on the Elk 101, but out on the Hunt Talk forum and other forums I drop in on, everybody is complaining that, well, I can't believe they're discriminating against me. That land's my land as much as anybody else's. And so I get a lot of emails, maybe we save it for a different podcast, but saying, how is it that these Western states can discriminate against me when I'm a U.S. citizen and I own an equal interest in that?
And I pay taxes on federal land. Why can't I go and hunt on federal land in your state?
Yeah. Do we want to save that for later?
Cut and dry. That's that goes back to what we've talked about with Arizona being sued for discriminating against non-residents, and the state owns the game. Right. The state manages it. The residents of that state own the game in that state.
Yeah, and I tell people, think about this. You're making the argument that land ownership, quasi-land ownership by being a U.S. citizen, somehow gives you a right to the wildlife.
To the resources.
Would you like, in your state, to have to go and buy your tag from private landowners? That's effect what they're saying. And the historical reason behind it is in 1842, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case, Martin versus Waddell, that was decided. And it was about the tide flats, the shellfish. And it went all the way to U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, no. All wildlife, they called it the fishings, hawkings, and fowlings or something. Anyhow, it was meant to be the fish and game, is to be held in trust for the citizens of that state by the state. And that there is and they went into this law. So the person argued that because he inherited this land from someone who had a land grant from the King of England, that with those old English land grants came the rights to the wildlife. And the opinion of the court said, no, when we marched the British into the ocean out there and then they gave up and we declared our independence, that severed all land grants from the state, or from the King of England. And after the United States became its own country, it's a very important case, and that's why I'm focusing on it. It's the precedent case that most of these wildlife issues are based on, is that it just came down to each state is to hold this in trust and manage these assets, if you want to call it an asset, this resource, for the benefit of its citizens, not of the citizens of the country, the citizens of that state. So it's kind of weird that the wildlife is transitory, it's moving, it's fluid across the landscape.
Even across state lines.
Yeah. And so you're talking about how some of the elk from Nevada go to Idaho. Well, those elk, when they're in Nevada, are under the management responsibility, the trusteeship of the state of Nevada. As quick as they come to Idaho, it's not like they have a Nevada brand on them. These now become elk that are under the trusteeship of the state of Idaho. Yep. Same elk, but it's just, it's how these cases, and we could spin. I've done so many presentations and stuff on this, but the point is there's no connection between land ownership and wildlife opportunity.
Yep. You're welcome to come to Idaho and camp and hike on federal land.
Right.
And utilize that land as a tax-paying American citizen. Yeah. But the animals that are there belong to the state, and you have to play that state's game in order to have a chance at accessing them.
Right. So even though we went through that little dissertation there, I'm sure when the draw results come out, there's still going to be the same people. And I get it. If I lived in some other state, I wouldn't like that. What's Oregon? 5% of the tags
for non-residents.
Yeah. Look at Colorado and Wyoming; they're crazy generous to non-residents in terms of percentages. And then they also, the huge disparity in prices we just talked about. Utah, it's not even a 3-to-1 disparity for elk. In Montana, it's a 30-to-1 disparity that's crazy. That's out of hand. But the flip side of that is then you'll have people say, well, how can that interstate commerce laws, all these clauses of the U.S. Constitution, you can't discriminate against other citizens based on where they live? Well, yes, Baldwin versus Commissioner in 1978, a friend of mine in Bozeman argued that case all the way to the Supreme Court, and he prevailed. And the Supreme Court said that elk hunting is not a right. Yep. Therefore, you have no right that's being violated, and the state of Montana can charge whatever they want.
Yeah. Look at college tuition. Yeah. I mean, in-state residents pay less than out-of-state, and they can charge whatever they want for you to go there and take advantage of their resources. And it's so
there's always these rumblings that someone needs to start a lawsuit. You know what? There's been a lot of them. It's
been established.
If you want to put money in the pockets of a bunch of attorneys, go get all lawyered up, you and your pals.
Yep.
And I can tell you pretty much what your outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of these cases, and
I think Arizona is probably the most recent established.
Yeah.
Yes, we can discriminate against non-residents, even though the initial ruling was, okay, you've got to add more tags here until we get a chance to look at this.
Right.
But it came back, and the next year they were back to the same. And
right. And also Congress said, we're going to pass a law. I think, I'm trying to remember who it was. It was a Nevada and an Arizona senator, I think, who the next year they just passed a law reaffirming the right of the states to manage wildlife and discriminate.
Yep, just to stop any of those lawsuits.
Right, and saying which principles or which clauses of the U.S. Constitution don't apply to wildlife. And so I think we've seen the end of most of those lawsuits. We haven't seen the end of
the complaining.
Right. That's what we have not seen the end of. And I know some people listening will say, well, you guys live in Idaho and Montana, and no wonder you're in favor of that.
Yeah. I hunt far more places as a non-resident than as a resident.
Yeah,
so.
I said in my podcast one time, the odds are you're a non-resident in 49 other states. If you're not a non-resident in 49 other states, there's some game agencies that want to talk to you.
And there are some people who claim residency in more than one state for the purpose of getting resident tags.
Oh, gosh. So even though we live in a state where we get to hunt elk every year because we apply in all these states, it affects us also.
Yep.
And I protect the right. I do not want wildlife to become a federal wildlife management system.
Same as land.
Yeah. I want wildlife to be a state purview, and I want to have public land be public land. Yep. Under our Constitution, if you understand it and read it, you understand why we are where we're at.
Yep.
And so getting out on a forum and complaining about it ain't going to change anything.
No.
But it might make you feel better. Yeah. So
we're all disappointed when we don't draw tags. So we've got to have something to complain about.
Me too. When I don't draw, I feel like I got ripped off. But the flip side of that is when I do draw, everyone says, "Oh, you high profile people. Yeah. They just want you to come to that state." I'm like, oh man. If they knew how many applications do you think you do in a year? But now that you dropped Utah.
Yeah, I probably, I do points or apply in 6 or 7 states.
Do you do any species other than elk?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I've got issues. I look at how many tags I apply for personally, and that just if you ever studied statistics and probabilities, you'd understand why I'm going to draw a tag or two every year.
Oh, yeah.
Because of, you saw that spreadsheet, right?
The law of probability. You apply for 100 tags and the draw odds average 3%, you're probably going to draw 3 tags on average.
Yeah. So, well, before we leave, We've done the Sitka question. We've done a good plug for all of our other partners. Gerber, we've not. I don't know why I did. I need to think about. We need a Gerber stunt.
A Gerber stunt?
Yeah. What do we call it? The Gerber Randy's recommended unit from Gerber. Oh boy, we'd get in trouble over that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, you start telling people what specific unit to apply for.
Yeah, someone would bring their Gerber multi-tool and start pulling my teeth with it or something.
At least stick it in a tire.
We haven't done one for Rocky Mountain Hunting Call, so I guess we could just have you bugle every time.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that'd make this crowd. But anyhow, this last one is for the Elk Foundation. We want to make sure and do some awareness of their access work in every podcast. And this one here just got done in Montana. It's what's called the Edith Peak. And you guys have a lot of timber companies here in Idaho.
Yeah.
Does Stimson have a presence here in Idaho?
In northern Idaho, more so than down where we are. But yeah, they're here.
So a lot of the timber companies are good partners in access. This case here, Stimson decided that they wanted to conserve the access to this area on the Lolo National Forest, and so them and the Elk Foundation worked together, and they came up with this 1,120 acres is what it is. It's really, really good wildlife habitat. I think they say that it winters 500 elk, but it's going to be open to the public, and it's going to open up access to a lot of other places through that 1,120 acres. And then the funding came through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And if you know much about that, the Land and Water Conservation Fund is a federal program where offshore oil and gas royalties are earmarked for acquisitions like this. And Congress let that expire in September, and so there's a big push going on right now in Congress, or outside of Congress, to get Congress to renew it. Whether or not they will, I hope they do it. It had been in place for 50 years. And if you're an elk hunter, I would just about bet you've hunted many places that have been acquired with money from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And so what happens is the Forest Service gets allocated this money. The Elk Foundation puts together the deal and the projects, usually puts the money up front, and then goes to the federal agency and say, hey, when you get this LWCF money, help reimburse us some of these upfront costs we paid, and then we'll put the land in, in this case, it's going to be held by the Forest Service. So all those lands end up either being held by a state wildlife agency, the Forest Service, or the BLM. And so this is just another example of how the Elk Foundation is creating more public access. And I don't want to lift the lid too far, but expect that in 2019 you're going to hear a whole lot more even more about access from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Yep. A lot more. It's fun to watch how much they're doing in the access world. They've got the infrastructure and the staff and the reputation that they can really get it done out here in elk country, and it's exciting to see it happening.
Yeah, because it is something that, I was just talking to a guy this past week, and it doesn't have necessarily to do with public land access, but he drew an elk tag, and in that unit there are only 2 roads that you can access off of. Uh-huh. And so with limited access, he's like, this was a controlled hunt that was hard to draw, but we saw more people on that hunt than I would have hunting an over-the-counter unit because of the access points from that road. Oh. And when you start looking at private land, public land access, the same thing happens. If you get too much private land, all of the hunters are concentrated onto that little bit of public. So the more we can open up, whether it's easement access, whether it's securing public access, the more we have for that, the more areas we're going to be able to go and get away from other hunting pressure and have that experience that we're looking for and that we're used to. Yeah.
When you're saying that, it made me think of something. In Idaho, do you have to apply for a cow tag here, cow elk? Or some
so it depends.
Okay. Some units.
For archery here, most units are either sex. So you can hunt either one. Archery seasons are broke up into A tags and B tags. Depending on which tag you have, sometimes there's different regulations there. Most of the rifle hunts are going to be antler only. for over-the-counter, and you can apply, and they're very easy. Some of them are 100% draw success for antlerless hunts, and then a lot of the muzzleloader tags in November are cow hunts. So we do have some over-the-counter and some draw.
Because in Montana, we have quite a few places where they're trying to take cows that are creating crop damage or whatever it might be, fence damage. And so the debate is, well, should you restrict those to strictly private land so that you aren't shooting the cows on the public land? And here's an example of what happened when they first went on an all-out mission in Montana to lower elk numbers. And I'll use the Madison herd, Madison Valley down by Ennis as an example. Is a lot of those elk would migrate from other places off public land down into those valleys. Well, they issued cow tags to try and knock the numbers down off these private ranches. Well, we got a bad winter, and guess what elk showed up during these cow seasons? Not the elk they're trying to kill. The migratory elk that would still live in the lower forest country, those were the elk that showed up, and those are the elk that just got waylaid. And that was, I think, almost 20 years ago now. And they still have not recovered.
Really?
Yeah. That group that was the migratory group just got hammered so hard. And then you throw in, all the other factors of wolves and grizzly bears and stuff where now it's just hard for them to build back up. And Fish, Wildlife, and Parks will admit, we messed that up. We should have made that available as private land only harvest at that time. And so I was just wondering here if that was the case, because a lot of times these public-private interfaces create management challenges for the state agencies, especially if you have migratory elk.
Absolutely.
You'll have some elk that just year-round live in the hayfield, and then you have some migratory ones. Which ones are you trying to hammer? Usually you're trying to hammer the ones that are in the hayfield causing the damage. Yep. And that then creates the whole other problem of, well, this guy says, come in and shoot him. And as quick as you shoot him, they go to the next guy's place, and he won't let you. He won't let anyone in there, not because he's outfitted. He just likes lots of elk. Yeah. He doesn't like hunting. And we're seeing that in Montana more and more and more and more, where they call them the new age landowners. They show up and they just have a very high tolerance for wildlife, which in some respects, I have a super high tolerance for wildlife also. But when you're trying to address some of these concerns of ag producers, you can't force somebody to open the adjacent ranch to say, hey, we know that you love elk, but we need to kill some of them. Yep. We want to come on your property. So when you're talking about some of these access point things, I see that happening more and more, where it's really hard for a state agency to manage these female numbers, which is what you use to manage the overall population. I don't have the answer to it. I just was wondering if it's something that you see as a challenge.
Not as much, and we don't have, and obviously it's area dependent within every state. Yeah. I think Montana has bigger sections of private landowners in elk habitat than what Idaho deals with, but there are some local units around here that absolutely the elk come off of the mountain down into the hayfields in the hundreds, and the farmers get upset about it. Yeah. And something has to be done to help them, to compensate them, to get the elk displaced off of their places so they don't do as much damage. And it always runs into that same thing. Somebody's complaining about all the elk on their private property, but they want to allow hunting access on their property for anybody else. It's almost like they want to either shoot all the elk or have the agency come in and shoot them. And so there's such a balancing act there that has to be maintained by the agencies. And
someday we need to have agency people retired agency people on them, because if
they can speak liberally.
Exactly. If they still have their paycheck dependent upon the agency, they're never going to be able to speak with true thoughts on the issue. So that's one thing I have learned in the media world is, if you want the real facts, go talk to a retired agency person, not a current agency person, because they don't want to get shipped to the far corners of Siberia for their next job position or lose their job altogether, which that's human nature. I wouldn't want to lose my job either. So, anyhow, another tangent.
That's right.
So, all right.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap for this one.
Thanks for listening, folks.
Yep. We'll catch you on the next one.
Yep.